Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. We have Srikanth and Vikram today to give us insights on investor rights and capital management. Especially this niche topic has been a ask from majority of our community startups because there's an art and science to investor rights and capital management. So it's a pleasure to have you, Srikanth and Vikram here. And before we go ahead and start, I would like to give a very quick brief, though you shared a big page intro about yourself. I'd like to sum it up and share, very highlight insights about your profile. So Vikram is a country head in India at Capita FinTech. He's a chartered accountant and an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. He has 12 years of experience in investment banking at organizations including Citigroup and Spark Capital. In his last stint, he served as a CFO to India's leading rural e-commerce startup. Vikram is passionate about working with and solving problems for founders and startups. It's a pleasure to have you here, Vikram. Thank you. Moving on the panel, we also have Srikanth Prabhu. He is head partnerships in GTM at Capita FinTech. He's an engineer from NITK and MBA from IIM Bangalore. He has 10 years of experience in technology, investment banking, VC capital at organizations like Goldman Sachs and RBS. He was one of the founding members of Social Alpha, an impact-focused investment fund where he incubated 130 plus startups, led 40 plus investments, and oversaw 3 plus exits. It's a pleasure to have you here, Srikanth. Welcome on board. Let's get started. I don't want to waste much of our time on intros, but let's get started. I'm super excited to understand what is this art and science and this capital management. Are there any tricks and turns that me and my founders can actually use when they're like facing different hiccups in terms of their fundraise pursuits? So you can quickly start with giving an intro about Capita itself or capital management itself, then we can move on the practical insights. So over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Aarti, for that introduction. I think Aarti's covered it very well about the two of us. The one thing which we have in common, me and Srikanth, is we're very passionate about working with startups. Both of us have been in prior roles where the key excitement for us in whatever we did so far was in working with startups, seeing companies grow from a very small stage to a very large stage. And we are continuing that journey in Capita as well. So as a company, we are a Singapore headquartered firm covering India and Southeast Asia. We have a physical office in Hyderabad in India. Our focus is on digital equity management solutions, which Srikanth will show a little bit of our platform and how it can help in managing equity for startups like yourself. Let me get into the presentation itself. We have quite a few things to cover, and I'm hoping it will add value to all of you. Is my screen visible, Aarti?
Yes.
Yes, it's visible.
Perfect. So I can skip this slide. Aarti's already covered it. When it comes to investor rights and cap table management, we look at it in the broader framework of equity management. So what is equity? Why is it important for startups and for founders to manage this equity as they scale up their companies and as they sort of grow their business? Let me just cover a little bit of that. So what is our perspective on equity? Equity is a measure of ownership and control. So your equity percentage in your company determines the proportion of value which accrues to you, let's say as a founder in the company. Equity is also a measure of control from a Companies Act and from a regulation perspective. There are certain rights which you have if you hold more than 51% stake in a company. There are certain rights if you cross 76. There are certain rights if you cross 26. So it's also an element of control and voting rights from a company perspective. But if I were to look at equity from an investor's lens, especially for an early stage startup, where you may not have very showcaseable metrics in terms of either financial metrics or operating metrics. Equity is a tangible value of how investable the investor believes the startup is, right? And that is a factor of multiple things, of the team, the idea, the passion which entrepreneur brings in, and in case there is a running business, financial and operating metrics as well. So when you go to raise funds from an external equity investor, he looks at the team, the founder, the company, the idea, and the business, and puts a certain value to it, right? And that is there may be a lot of intangible factors going into that judgment, but ultimately it comes out with a tangible valuation for the company. So that's another way of thinking about, let's say, the equity value of what you have built as a founder. Equity is a very, very sort of important currency, very, very valuable currency which the founder has. And in some early stages, if you have not raised funding, probably it's the only currency you have to start with. What should you part with equity in return for if you are an early stage founder? The most common use case is capital. You will part with a portion of your company to raise capital and to grow your company further. Let's say from financial investors. It's equally important for you to reserve and part with some portion of your equity to acquire, grow, and retain talent within your company in the form of, let's say, ESOPs. And also, what is something not very commonly covered is using or leveraging equity to acquire strategic relationships, things which maybe your financial investors can provide as well, or bringing a few people on board as an advisory board, or as bringing a few companies to partner with you and open more doors for you and help you grow your business faster in more directions. So that's something which founders have to be cognizant of in terms of what do I part with equity for as I sort of grow the business. Why is managing equity important? The most obvious thing which comes to any founder is valuation and dilution. So you want to create something valuable enough for the investor to put a certain number to it, help you raise whatever amount of funding which you sort of need at as little a dilution as possible, so that you retain maximum control of the company. So that's the more obvious element of it. But beyond that, the rights which you give out to your investors also has a bearing on the whole equity component itself, because the rights may actually entitle investors to something which goes beyond whatever he holds on paper, let's say 25% or 30%, but he may have certain rights which give him a higher proportion stake in your company, which we'll sort of cover in subsequent slides. So the most critical aspects of managing equity, and the most obvious aspects of it, would be your fundraise and how you sort of time and manage your fundraise itself. Just to give you some perspective or some perspectives on how to time your fundraise. Ultimately, how much equity you part with is a function of what your investors' perception of value is. And the one thumb rule to follow here is that investors, if you go present an idea versus presenting a running business, you will always, or I would say in most cases, get better value for a business as compared to just an idea. This is purely a result of the risk perception at the investor level. A running business which generates metrics, operating and financial metrics, is far easier to value. There is far less risk attached to it as compared to just an idea which you're going to investors for, and that gives them some element of risk, and that impacts your starting valuation as well, and thereby your equity stake as well. So founders always will have this dilemma: should I raise faster earlier in my life cycle when it's, let's say, more of an idea and less of a business? Thereby, I need to the investor's perception of value is lower. Therefore, I end up diluting more. Do I do that, or do I wait and sort of for a later point of time when I'm able to showcase more metrics and showcase a better element of valuation and end up with lesser dilution? So this will always be a dilemma. It is very easy for me to say yeah, it's always preferable to go for lower dilution. And although it sounds cliched, it's something which founders should think about, to be bootstrapped as long as possible. But the decision is not going to be as simple as that. There are several determinants to this timing element. The sector you're operating in, the business model. Is it a business model where you require a lot of capital upfront? Then you may not have a choice. So rather than growing at a slow pace, waiting for it to be bootstrapped and shooting for a certain target dilution, you may be better off just raising earlier and attacking the market faster. What is your competition doing? Are they being very aggressive in terms of fundraise and in terms of expansion? If that's the case, then waiting for too long may actually lead to the market being taken away by someone else, right? So it's a very, very nuanced decision. It's a very difficult decision to take. But yeah, these are some perspectives which founders should think about as they think about the timing of their fundraise. Other element when it comes to, let's say, the quantum of your fundraise. So if you are running a startup which is profitable, you are very, very rare, and that puts you in a very, very good position. But for the vast majority of people at an early stage, you will need funding to sort of sustain your losses. So the very simple sort of thumb rule to follow here is that I need enough funding to carry me through to the next round of to the next round of valuation benchmark and to my next series of funding. So how much am I raising right now? What is my burn going to be with my with my expansion plan factored in, and whatever can I showcase enough metrics to get a desired valuation and to attract investors for a larger set of funding. Will this funding sort of be enough to carry me through to the next stage? That is the first question which any founder should ask themselves. Apart from let's say managing your cash burn, managing and maintaining a certain runway, quantum of funding also depends on your execution capability. Because it is a bit wasteful in my mind to raise more capital than what is required, than what you can actually deploy. And deployment and growth of a business is not purely a factor of capital alone, it's also a factor of capability. So if I'm running a sales driven organization, can I go from 1 city to 50 cities in the course of a year? It may not practically be possible. You may have the capital to carry it through, but you may not be able to do it in the same speed. So always ensure that you raise as much as what you need, and you can always sort of raise more in the next round of funding and carry through your execution plans, your expansion plans. So there are determinants for your quantum of determining your quantum of funding as well. What is the runway which you are shooting for? Do you believe you can sort of generate enough metrics and scale the business enough in, let's say, 18 months, and you're very confident of getting the next round of funding in 18 months, or it could be 24 months? What are your growth plans? How quickly do you plan to consume capital? You should all founders, all companies should have some element of safety margin in mind. Fundraise may take longer than what is expected, and you always have black swan events like COVID, etc., which may come and which can put a spoke in your plans. So what is a safety margin which you as a founder are comfortable with? And you also need to balance this with investor perception of value and the dilution as well, to ensure that you as a founder always have a certain desired stake in the company. Because the pitfall of raising too much and raising too quickly also may mean that as a founder your stake gets diluted a fair bit. So that's at a broad perspective of why we feel equity management is important. Now coming to certain aspects of it, what is this cap table, which we keep talking about? This is a term you could have come across when you go for your first round of funding, where the investors say, show me your cap table. So simply put, a cap table is just a statement of ownership of the company across multiple securities. As you raise funding, you may raise funding not just by issuing equity shares, you may raise funding through issuing other securities as well. How is your cap table sort of constructed? So it's not it's not a static sort of a thing. It's something which is constructed by taking into account a variety of transactions which may impact your ownership. So the most obvious ones being raising funds, so issuing new shares to new investors, parting away with some portion of equity of your company in return for capital, but several other elements of so any adjustments in the stake, any change in the rights which you're giving to investors may all sort of impact your cap table. So summation of all those transactions brings you to a certain let's say percentage ownership and a number of shares today as a founder and for other investors as well. So you would have heard the term fully diluted cap table. And what does this term fully diluted mean? That is, in our mind, when we think about ownership, we automatically think about a fully diluted ownership. And that is the relevant sort of metric which a founder has to track. Because ownership can be understood by different people in different ways. Maybe your company secretary may look at ownership to say, okay, so there are certain people who hold equity shares, certain people who hold preference share, and that's that, right? Your company secretary or chartered accountant may also exclude the ESOPs. So you may create an ESOP pool, but you may not have actually issued shares. So it's not going to show up on your secretarial records or on your MCA records. So is that actually part of your ownership? Should that be tracked? In a fully diluted cap table, all of these items are tracked. So you look at your cap table on a unified element, assuming your convertible securities convert on a certain basis, and assuming all obligations to issue equity, as is the case with an ESOP pool or a convertible instrument, etc. If all of that has been factored in. So that's the true representation of the ownership which you have in the company. So if I exclude my ESOP pool, optically, I may look as if I have a certain ownership in the company, but the right way to look at it is to say that my employees do own a certain portion of my company today, and I have to factor that in when I look at the calculation as well. So to give you some sense of that in investment structures which are typically followed in private equity / venture capital funding, and these are all the things which you will typically see on your cap table as you sort of scale the business. Equity versus preference is something which some of you may already be familiar with if you have raised funding. Equity share represents the most basic version of ownership, which typically the founders will have. Founders, friends, family, etc. sort of people who have invested may sort of have. But any professional investor, even at an angel level and definitely at an institutional level, would prefer to invest in your company in the form of preference shares. That's because the investor would want certain additional rights, over the founder, which he's not going to get by holding an equity share. So the most preferred element, would be a compulsorily convertible preference share. That is what you would see in most investment rounds. The securities which you issue can be convertible or redeemable. Any foreign sort of funding will invariably end up being convertible, sort of securities, which will compulsorily convert into equity. But if you have a domestic investor and you're trying to raise a quasi debt, quasi equity sort of round, you may see redeemable, sort of securities as well, where you might need to. It operates more like a debt instrument, and you have to sort of repay the amount with interest or with the redemption premium sort of a thing. You may also have securities which straddle the two to be optionally convertible or optionally redeemable as well. But these are structures which also you might sort of see as you sort of raise funding. There's a new concept of differential voting rights securities now. It's been made fairly popular or fairly well known in India thanks to Ola, where the founder of Ola was diluting more and more as he kept raising more and more capital. But he wanted to retain ownership control and voting control of the business because he didn't want his investors to influence the way in which he ran the business. So he ended up offering securities with differential voting rights to some of the new investors he started taking on. So this basically says that as a founder, although my economic interest in the company is getting diluted to, let's say, 25%, 10%, 5%, etc., I'm going to issue a class of security which only carries 1/10 of the voting rights to my investors. So I may hold 5% of actual economic ownership in a company, but I may hold 26% of voting control of a company. So this is something, again, just to ensure that the founders still retain control of the company. We are seeing these securities more and more becoming more and more common in the Indian market as well. And there are, like I said, quasi-debt securities in the form of, let's say, convertible notes. This is typically used during a bridge round, where you feel that the company has done well, it has scaled up, but probably not to an extent where you can attract the next set of investors or to attract institutional investors. So you may end up going back to your existing investors and asking them to do a bridge round, to basically say that, if you can give me a little bit of additional capital, I can really grow this business and shoot for a much better valuation when I do my next round of funding. And in return, I will sort of give you guys a discount to the next round of funding. You can convert it a discount to the next round of funding, and you get a certain benefit by doing that. So that is typically denominated as convertible notes. So the condition here is that you have to do a next round of funding within a certain time frame. If not, the investor has the right to treat it as debt and actually ask for the money back, or he can convert it at a certain low valuation. That's how these instruments sort of behave. Another instrument which was made popular by Y Combinator in the US, which has also started coming to India, is a SAFE instrument, a simple agreement for future equity. Operates a bit similar to a convertible note, but there is no redemption here. So the investor chooses to take a bet on you. He is giving you equity, but he doesn't want to put a valuation to the company at this point of time. There could be a disconnect. You may find it difficult to value the company because it's at a fairly early stage. So the investor says, okay, I'm not going to put a certain dollar number or a rupee number on this company. Please give me a discount to the next round of funding. So if I'm raising a Series A, and I hope to raise a Series A in 12 months, this is going to be a seed round of funding, which, let's say, operates at a 25% discount to that round, right? So that's called a SAFE instrument. Again, in India, this typically takes the form of a CCPS or a convertible preference share. And you have instruments like warrants as well, which allow the founders to increase their stake in the company. So this is typically sort of performance based. As a bit of an incentive which the investors give the founders to say that, okay, I came in at a certain valuation, but if you outperform expectations and outperform the business plan, I'm happy to cede some of my stake back to you as a founder, and you can increase your stake by holding warrants in the company. So these are common investment structures which sort of you typically come across, and it's important that founders also understand how these structures work. So like I said, your investor rights also play a role in the ownership and in the equity of a company. So you may have an investor who holds a certain stake optically, but the rights he holds may give him an even higher stake depending on certain exit scenarios. So the most important right which founders should be aware of is the liquidation preference right. So conceptually this means, and this is the reason why investors also prefer to invest in preference share and they don't take equity share. The investor basically tells the founder that I'm a professional investor. So the one thing which you have to promise me is that while I'm taking an equity risk in your company, in case we are selling the company, there's a liquidation event. I will take out my capital first before you take out your capital. So this is like a very, very common right. You will see at an angel level and even beyond, this right becomes enshrined in your documents which you are signing. Conceptually, to tell the founder that if you have taken capital from me, it is an obligation on you to return that capital back before you start taking capital for yourself. That's a very, very simple explanation of this. There are certain nuances here as well. As you get multiple investors, investors have to be ordered in terms of seniority. The thumb rule to follow is that later investors tend to take out their capital earlier, but investors may also sort of agree to take out capital in the same proportion as their investment and take it out together. There is also a concept of multiplier here. So some investors may say, okay, it is your obligation to return capital to me. But some of them, especially a VC investor, may say it is not enough if I just get my capital back, because I'm here to make 10x and 20x and 30x returns. Just getting a 1x is not going to work for me. You have to give me a 1.5x of capital back or a 2x of capital back in case you're selling the company or in case you're going down the path of liquidation. So this is an additional burden on the founders. They really have to push up the valuation, ensure that an exit happens, and the investor gets at 2x or 1.5x of capital back before they start seeing returns. And there's also another clause which comes across, especially in early stages, called a participating a liquidation preference, which basically says, investor says, I take out my capital out in full. But if I hold 20% stake in a company, I'm also going to participate on whatever is left to the extent of 20%. So at any point of time, I'm always going to be capital plus when it comes to my returns out of any liquidation scenario. So this again is something which impact the founder's exit or the payouts which are going to come to a founder. And that's something which you should be careful of as you sort of negotiate these rights with potential investors. A few other rights which are very common, which again have the impact of have an impact on the founder's stake, is one of those rights is anti-dilution. So this is basically to say that if you bring in an investor at a certain valuation, raise a certain capital for a certain quantum of stake from you are giving an implicit understanding to an investor that you will do all your future fundraise at a higher valuation. So if you are forced to go down for a down round, something hasn't worked out well, or there's an extraneous event which has happened, which has impacted the business, and you are only able to find a certain source of capital at a lower valuation, your investor basically says, please go ahead and raise it because you have to survive. But you will need to compensate me, because if you raise money at a lower valuation, I have to take a mark-to-market loss in my books and in my sort of accounting. So there are types of anti-dilution. There's something called full ratchet, where you say that, okay, if you are raising capital at a lower valuation, you will have to make it look as if I came in at exactly the same valuation, so that I don't take any mark-to-market loss at all. I'm completely protected against you raising capital to lower valuation. But this is something which is a little bit, or I would say quite restrictive for the founders, especially if they have multiple investors, all of whom have a full ratchet anti-dilution. This will telescope and create a fairly large impact for the founder in terms of reduction in his stake. So what most investors go for is what is called as a broad-based weighted average anti-dilution, where they make this calculation similar to a full ratchet, but they basically say that we will assign a certain weightage to this. I will take a fraction, which is basically the capital you're raising in the down round, divided by the total capital which you have raised so far. So if you are genuinely doing this down round as an emergency measure, as a survival measure, then you should not be raising a lot of capital here. So I will give you an additional weightage. If I'm supposed to get 5% additional stake in a full ratchet, I will say, okay, it's going to be 5% into, let's say, 1 crore by 10 crore, right? Only 10% of this 5%, only 0.5% should be the increase in my stake, because I know that you are going down, you're only raising 1 crore at a lower valuation, whereas you have raised 10 crore in the normal course of things, right? So you're basically trying to reduce the impact on the founder's stake by a weighted average anti-dilution. A few other terms which may not impact the stake, but which may impact the ability of the founder to raise additional funds, is a very common term called most favorable terms. So every investor will have this term to say that, okay, if you are raising capital on more favorable terms than what I'm offering you, leaving the valuation aside, then you should extend the same terms to me. So this again is something which typically gets into negotiation when you're raising the next round of funding, when you already have a few investors on your cap table. And there are a bunch of participative rights as well, where an investor says, okay, if the company is doing well, if it is raising the next round of funding, I want the ability to be able to double down on my bets and to control the fundraise of the company. So if the company is doing well, I want to be the first person to come out and offer my capital. And can I put some obligations on the company to actually accept the capital which I'm offering? So there are a few rights here, something called a preemptive right, which basically says the investor has the right to maintain his stake. So I have a certain stake in the company. You are doing a next round of funding. If I hold 20% stake in the company, I have the right to say 20% of the next round at the same valuation is my allocation. I should be able to, you should give me the right to invest because I want to maintain my stake without dilution. You have a few other rights called ROFR and ROFO, right of first refusal, right of first offer, where the investor has a hold on the founder in terms of the founder's ability to go out and raise capital. So ROFR basically says that if you are going to raise capital, when you get an offer from an investor, you have an obligation to come to your existing investor and say that I've got a certain offer. Do you want to match that offer? If you're going to match that offer, then I will go with whatever you're sort of offering. I will have to sort of close the deal with you. If you're not going to do it, then I have the right to close the deal with the investor whom I originally identified. Or it can be structured as a ROFO, where the investor says, even before you go out to the market, come to me first as your existing investors, allow me to make an offer. If you don't like my offer, you can go out, try to raise capital on better terms, but you cannot raise capital on worse terms than what I've offered to you. So these are a few rights which, from a, let's say, a captable perspective, may not affect your stake and valuation, but may affect your ability to raise additional capital and the sort of investors whom you can sort of approach. So I'll take a pause here and turn it over to Shrikant, and Shrikant can actually demonstrate some of what I've covered, just in terms of an example. Over to you, Shrikant.
Great. Thank you, Vikram, and good afternoon, everyone. There was one question on dilution, and we'll definitely cover that. That is something that is we can cover it in a very visible way. But just as I'm seeing a lot of audience trickling in. I just wanted a sense from the audience in terms of are there startups here who have raised, let's say, seed round of funding, or everyone is in more at the friends and family or bootstrap mode? Maybe if you can just comment, let's say that if you have raised seed round funding as as yes or something, I'll just get a sense of how many of you are more at a very early stage versus how many of you are more at look, raise some funds and looking to raise like a series A, series B. So I see some of you have said bootstrap, some of you have said angel. Okay. And great. So some of you have raised seed as well. So okay, that's a good mix. But I'm sensing that most of the people in the room are more early stage in their journey. Either you have raised a friends and family or an angel round, or might have raised a seed round kind of thing. Okay, so that's helpful, because then I will also bring up a relevant example at an early stage then, and maybe let's walk through a journey of a startup, and maybe you can relate to a lot of what Vikram said in practice, and that is what I intend to do. Okay. And yeah, feel keep your questions flowing in, and we'll try to address them. And Vikram can take over the chat, and while I will go into a demo mode. So let me first share my screen.
Yeah, before Srikant shares the screen, audience, please do keep your questions coming in the chat box. We would love to address them. Let's exploit Srikant and Vikram's experience in terms of fundraise, such that we can clear majority of our asks, right? Please put them in the chat box. Keep them coming.
Perfect. Yeah, and Vikram, whatever can be addressed, Vikram will address it on the chat, and others will take it up during the Q&A. Okay. So yeah, I'll just share because some of the questions were there. So let's take a startup. So I actually created this startup earlier today just for the sake of the demo, and because most of you are an early stage startup, I've kept it very simple. So this is this is on Capita, and I'm just sharing a lot of the concepts that Vikram explained using example of the startup. Now, this example is the startup is curiously called Wannabe Unicorn, because most of you who are looking to raise funds, you want it or not, eventually you will be evaluated as if you also will want to become a unicorn. And maybe if you are getting into venture capital mode, you have also no choice but to have that ambition of becoming a unicorn on one day or the other. right? And that is the way the whole venture capital works, because the percentage of success is very low, and those successes, they want it to be really big, and hence at the time of evaluation they'll obviously have the same lens of looking at you as a potential unicorn tomorrow, and that's why they want to invest in you. It's as simple as that. There are no two ways about it. So if you want to inhibit your ambitions and want to raise venture capital, maybe venture capital might not be the right source for you. You might as well do well with your friends and family, and investors who understand you and understand your ambition in some sense. That's one thing I wanted to get started with. And we'll cover a lot of things. So this is a very simple cap table. There are 5 stakeholders. I will actually show you who the 5 stakeholders are. This company has issued so many shares. This company has raised about 15 million, which is about 1.5 crores. So it's still early days for the startup, I would say, depending upon what sector you are in. And you also see the ownership and see, okay, bulk of the ownership is in equity shares. There are a few preferred shares given out to an angel investor. So one question was with regard to a friends and family round. So angel round is like a friends and family round. Typically your near and dear ones would have put that money in. And you have also carved out some ESOP pool, which is mainly for incentivizing employees. We will not cover ESOPs today, but you should know that ESOPs are great mechanisms for you to attract right talent when you don't have enough cash to pay them initially. So you're giving them value of your company, the share of your company, so that tomorrow they will hopefully make a return out of those equity options. And these are the stakeholders. So we've created a unique startup. Maybe this is an ideal startup. So you have a rock star founder, who's a salesperson, and then you have an ops task master who's very good in operations and perhaps a CEO, and you have a very good product guy who's, let's say, the CTO, right? So this is a classic 3-member startup, which every venture capital would love to fund, because initially it's all about the team, right? And then there is an angel investor, and so we kept abstract names for you to understand. So if I go to the cap table view, right, and this is the way you would have maintained your cap table today. So it's a very simple cap table. You all would have had incorporated with face value of 10 rupees, and 10,000 shares, 1 lakh paid up capital. So you see that the founders, the promoters who have common shares or ordinary shares or equity shares, they own about 10,000 shares between them. uh, we also have ESOPs worth 1,100 shares, which was earlier carved as a 10% pool, right? And we have just one example where there is an angel investor, which is typically your friends and family kind of thing. And this angel investor has put in about 50 lakhs of rupees. This is again most of the earlier rounds will be in the range of 20, 30, 50 lakhs when you are also not sure of the valuation. Now this angel investor, you see, has about 10% equity. So can anyone tell me, if you put in 50 lakhs and you got 10% equity, what is the stake? Sorry, what is the post money valuation of that angel investor? Any guesses? Is it like, is it 10 crores? Is it 1 crore? So if somebody put in 50 lakhs and they're getting 10% of the company, what do you think is the valuation of the company? If anyone who has raised round in the past, would you want to take a guess? Okay, 51 lakhs. Yeah, so it's roughly about 50 lakhs, 50 lakhs, 1,000 rupees. So let's broadly call it 50 lakhs. So anyone in the chat, if you can use the chat. So about 5 crores. So answer is 5 crores. Yeah. So basically I have put in 50 lakhs and I've got 10%. So I put in 50. After the company receives my 50, they are giving me 10%. So in this case, the pre-money valuation becomes 4.5 crores. And I put my 50 lakhs, that becomes 4.5 plus 0.5, 5 crores. And 5.5 divided by 5 is 10%. So that is the valuation you are getting basically, right? So this is because you got that valuation, the other investors got diluted. So for example, the ESOPs were earlier 10%. Because you gave 10% to this, 1% of the 10% has come from the ESOP pool, and the remaining 90% was held by the promoters. So the remaining 9% actually came from the promoters, right? So that's how your 10% as an angel investor, if you were an angel investor, it got allocated, right? And all the other people got diluted. If you owned a larger percentage in the company, you would dilute much larger, because the dilution happens proportionately. Why? Because you are basically giving a certain number of shares, and everyone is basically proportionally getting diluted. So because so in this case, for example, I am giving 1235 shares. So your numerator is the same, 4000 shares, but the denominator is getting added with the additional 235 shares, which are newly issued by the company. And hence, the person with the largest number of shares actually will get diluted the largest, right? So that is the way it works. It's simple kind of ratio proportion, right? So this is a basic cap table. A little bit on the cap table management that also Vikram covered. Why is it important? Because every investor who want to invest, even the angel investor who invested, said, okay, I'm putting in 50 lakhs, which is very substantial amount for me at least. And I know it is for you also, because you are at an early stage. Nobody has put in money in you. So obviously this 50 lakhs means a lot. So I want a meaningful chunk of, a meaningful chunk of investment stake. And that's why he must have proposed, he or she must have proposed 10%, and you agreed at some point, and you have 10% now, right? So your baseline valuation has now become 5 crores, because that is the way you have priced this round. Now, another aspect of cap table management is, you can use this platform to manage all aspects of your cap table. So we capture your documentation. So every investor wants your documentation to be accurate. Let's say you did your incorporation issuance. Do you have your share certificates, right? Is the share certificate reflecting the number of shares that you have shown here? Or let's say if it is an investor who's come, have you signed a shareholder agreement with that investor, which will capture all the various aspects that Vikram spoke about, right? Or have you filed a board resolution to onboard the new investor? Or have you filed the relevant ROC forms to issue the new shares? Or have you got valuation report if it was a priced round where there was a valuation, right? So there is various documentation needed, and one good practice of a cap table management is also to simultaneously manage the documents. Now the good thing about a platform like this is all of this can be done in one place. As you add a transaction, you're basically also managing all the documents at one place. So tomorrow, let's say a institutional investor comes to invest in you, because an angel investor would not have cared about due diligence. He or she would have been your friend, so he or she would have just uh, uh, invested in this. But let's say tomorrow a Sequoia Capital comes, or let's say Hyderabad Angel comes, right? They are in a way more organized. They will insist for a due diligence, and if you don't have all your paperwork in one place, then it will become an issue. Things will get delayed. Sometimes things also get derailed. So you need to be very careful about all of those things. So now, if you notice curiously, I also added a convertible investor here, and I've kept abstract names just to get the concept across. So we have a great team. We have rockstar founder, product, ops, the ideal team that any investor would invest in. This startup has attracted angel investments. And then recently this startup also got a convertible investor. Now, why is it convertible? Like Vikram mentioned, that sometimes you might not want to agree, you agree to disagree on the valuation. So this maybe this angel investor first put in, and you desperately needed that money, because you couldn't not have started with that money. But then after, like, say 2-3 months, this convertible investor comes, hey, I really like your product, and I really like your company. If you're looking to for raise funds, I will put in money. Maybe you were not looking to raise money at that time, but you said, hey, this person has come, so maybe it's always good to have more money in the bank, so that there's more cushion for me to spend. And you said, okay, why don't you put in the money, but I don't want to discuss the valuation with you right now. And so then you say, okay, because maybe that person said, okay, give me a 7 crore valuation, but you thought, I've made significant progress since the previous investor, so I would not take anything less than, let's say, 10 crore valuation. So then you agree, saying, okay, let's not debate on the valuation, let us take as a convertible instrument. So if you look at a convertible investor, there is no shares issued. It is like a debt. So it is just that 1 crore is in your bank. In your books, you are showing it as debt, and it is there is an obligation tomorrow that it might convert to equity based on the option of the note holder, right? And uh, now Vikram talked about the concept of fully diluted cap table. Now, from a shares point of view, this is a fully diluted cap table, because all the shares of this company, be it common shares or this angel investor actually has CCPS, these are all reflected. but the convertible note is still not reflected. So we also have a way on the platform to indicate the fully diluted cap table. So we can assume a particular valuation that, hey, let's assume that tomorrow this convertible note gets converted at a particular valuation. Let's say it converts tomorrow today, and let's say post money is easier to understand. And let's say this 1 crore tomorrow gets converted at your desired valuation, which is 10 crores, right? So let me just do that. So the 10 crores, right? So the company now, the 1 crore is now getting valued at 10 crores on a post money basis, which means what is the dilution that will happen, what is the issuance that will happen. Let me just run it now, for example. So it will run, and now you see that the convertible note investor got issued 1372 shares extra by the company against the convertible note money that he or she put in, and 10% worth stake is getting uh, issued to that particular investor, which means all the other shareholders have again diluted to the extent of 10%. So the earlier guy who came in with 10% has now become 9%, because 10% of 10%, which is 1%, got diluted from his stake, and that's why 9%. And similar logic will apply for all other stakeholders. So 10% of 9%, so 0.9% got diluted here, and respectively the promoters also got diluted, right? So this way you can get a fully diluted cap table, like Vikram mentioned, which is very important for you to know that if the answer was, if I go back to the original, you would see that this was a different shares, and once the convertible note converts, it is a different share. So you as a promoter should be aware that these changes will happen in your cap table, and it is very important for you to know a picture that in the best case scenario or in the worst case scenario, how is the dilution going to impact your cap table. Now this is a very simple example, right? Now let's assume that this company go and for that we also have something called a scenario analysis. So you can go to a scenario analysis, and we have a scenario called a finance round. Now let's assume that we raised an angel round with friends and family, like we discussed, and at this particular price. Now let's assume that we raise a seed round, okay? And for a hypothetical example, let's assume we raise a seed round of another 1 crore, just as an example. And let's call it seed round, and let's say the pre-money valuation is let's say 10 crores, okay? Or let's say it is 7 crores. Yeah, let's say it's 7 crores, okay? And then 1 crore gets added, right? Okay, so now there are other options you have. I'll not complicate it enough because you're all early stage startups, but there is anti-dilution, which Vikram talked about. You can convert the convertible notes, you can top up your ESOPs, all those options are available. But when I do it, you see that I basically input 1 crore at 7 crore pre-money, which means it becomes 8 crore post-money. So 1 divided by 8 is 12.5. So automatically 12.5% gets diluted. So somebody asked, what is the effect of dilution of your friends and family round? You can see the dilution. So the promoters got diluted by almost 10+%, and the angel investor got diluted by about 1.25%. The ESOPs also got diluted by about 1%. So this is the effect of dilution when subsequent rounds happen. Now we did a very small round, and that's why the dilution was in this way. Now let's assume that you are sitting on two options, right? So let's say we do another finance round where we do another seed round, but this time let's say this company gets 5 crores, right? And we call it seed itself, and let's say the pre-money valuation in this case becomes 15%, okay? 15 crores, right? So that is 15 crores, and let's say the investment is 5 crores, like I said, right? So now when I run this scenario, now suddenly you see that you are actually diluting 25%, right? Is this now, do you think the second case is right or second case is wrong? Now there is no right or wrong answer. Maybe based on the situation, you can actually choose, what you wish to do. Because if let's say you need a lot of money to spend, let's say you're an e-commerce company, maybe 1 crore is nothing for you because your monthly digital marketing burn itself could be 1 crore, right? But let's say 5 crores gives you a meaningful runway. So maybe you will opt for a 5 crore despite you are diluting about 25%, right? Now whatever I have run, it's all saved here. So 1 crore, if you see, it was a 12.5% dilution, and but it was 1 crore only, right? but a 5 crore round is a 25% dilution, but it is giving you a much larger runway. Now, these are all options available to you as an entrepreneur, and I'm just showing you how the dilution is actually impacting your cap table. For example, the promoters, they're cumulatively diluted only about 10%. Here, the promoters are diluting about 20, this is about 15, so 21%, right? And then the others are the ESOPs and the angels are diluting the remaining. So this is the effect of dilution that is there. That hopefully answers about the dilution question, and also the basic aspects of the cap table management. Because Vikram also covered the investor rights, I'll also cover a little bit on the investor rights. So in this case, let's say the angel investor has come. So I'll run a scenario of, let's say, waterfall. So Vikram mentioned that cap tables have liquidation preference. So this company has raised, let's say, about 1.5 crores, and there's 1 crore of convertible note. So let's assume this company were to get a exit of 3 crores. Okay. So tomorrow, let's say you are getting a buyback from, you are getting bought out by another startup or some venture capital backed initiative, kind of a thing. And let's say we put 1 crore of debt because that is a convertible note. So with this, I can run a waterfall scenario where I actually perform what happens at various exit events, what happens to the payouts. And that's where what Vikram mentioned is relevant, that the liquidation preference kicks in, and the investor is getting paid out because he or she invested in your company, right? So you see that first year, until some extent, no one is getting paid out. The reason is because here the debt is getting paid out. So up to about 1 crore, only the convertible note holder is getting paid out. And then the other class of shares are getting paid out. And here you see, for every shareholder, what is the value they are making. Let's say the angel investor invested and he barely is able to make back his money, because that is the kind of the exit you are getting is not really great, right? And this is better explained by share class, where you see first the debt is getting paid out up to 1 crore, and then the angel investor is getting paid out, and then the promoters are getting paid out. So this is very important for people to know that uh, there's always priority for the investor whenever you sign these kind of terms, especially with regard to the liquidation preference, etc. And the whole system allows you to kind of do a lot of these configure these things and run these scenarios. All the scenarios you run are saved, so you can share it with your stakeholders and um, get a better understanding of how your cap table will behave on certain scenarios, right? So that's very briefly about basics of cap table management, how some of the investor rights get manifested. um, and we can also run anti-dilution. I didn't cover that, but there's a little bit of a paucity of time. But basically you can also do a finance round, and basically you can do a down round and include anti-dilution, which means you can include weighted average, broad base, full ratchet, all the explanation that Vikram gave. um, uh, let's say the seed round you do, you actually did the last round at 5 crores, but let's say you do a down round now, right? So let me try that actually. So let's say the pre-money valuation, instead of 5 crore, now suddenly becomes 2.5 crores. Okay. And the investment, you are getting additional 50 lakhs, right? So that way, is this 50? Yeah. So that way now you go for a full ratchet kind of anti-dilution, because it's a down round. Okay. Earlier valuation was at 5 crore. Now you are bringing it down to 2.5 crores. With this, you will see that uh, apart from the new investor getting the relevant stake for the investment, you are also seeing the old investor is being compensated. So instead of the old investor being diluted, he or she is compensated with additional shares. That is shown here. You can see that the angel investor had invested in at this amount, and uh, he or she is getting a twice the amount of shares, because there is an anti-dilution effect on the share on the cap table, right? So this is the impact of there's a risk that if you give out anti-dilution very freely, then promoters will have there might be a situation where promoters will dilute maximum from that pool, because the investor is getting the benefit of the anti-dilution, right? So these are all different scenarios, just trying to explain it more in a real life example. and going back to back to the cap table. So happy to take any questions on this, if there are any.
There are a couple of questions in the chat box.
Sure.
I'll just run them through. So, effect of dilution through raising capital from friends and family on future rounds of investors.
Yeah.
And I think as a follow-up, there's another question asking, one second.
Shrikant, I think there was a question from someone with respect to social impact investing.
Yeah, that you can address, but
Maybe offline. I can share my email and we can address it
cool.
offline.
I'll share the email ID with you, Lavanya. And what is the preferred ways to raise funds from friends who are in US? So these are like friends and family.
So there are just, I mean, Vikram can also take it, but there are some additional bit of compliances you need to do because it will be treated as foreign money, basically. So, and by nature,
investment wise, there's no difference. It depends on whether it's foreign or Indian. Depends on what the investor wants. If the investor wants additional rights like liquidation preference, etc., then you have to issue preference shares. If not, you can even do equity shares. But yeah, like Shrikant said, there are additional compliances. It can't be a debt instrument. There are very, very significant regulations and restrictions on raising debt from outside India. So it will have to be an equity instrument, either equity or compulsorily convertible preference shares sort of a thing. And there are some filings which you need to do with the RBI if you're raising capital from outside India, which is a matter of formality, not that it's very difficult to do. So yeah, it's very much possible to sort of do it with those additional obligations to be taken care of.
Right.
Shrikant, one question on pricing. Maybe you want to cover pricing and what we have for T-Hub for the attendees.
Yeah, so I mean, this product is available for everyone. For early stage startups, actually, this product is free. For T-Hub, we will soon launch the thing with as part of T-Hub shared services. I mean, as a partner, and up to 1 million of fundraise and 25 shareholders on your cap table, we are giving this product for free, and anyone is free to sign it up. Yeah.
Yeah, interested founders can just slide into my DMs and give their names. We can take it up. So, what is your take on impact investments, Shrikant, just to address the question?
Sorry, I didn't see the. Let me just see on the chat the question.
So it's on the chat.
Yeah. So the question goes like: we are a small group of investors looking at developing the social entrepreneurship sector. Right now, we are in the idea stage. What would be a good place to start?
So I'm assuming you are a group of investors. So you can actually create a small. I mean, you can invest as angels. One thing I'm not sure whether you want to be entrepreneurs or you just want to remain as investors. If you want to remain as investors, there are various ways in which you can do. You can actually do angel investing. There are organizations like Social Alpha, which are impact funds who co-invest with investors like yours. So you can they can show you can connect with me. I can link you to them because they every month they send out a deal pipeline of potential investment opportunities for impact startups. So you can reach out and you can participate. So let's say if Social Alpha is putting in 1 crore of investment, you can add 20 lakhs 30 lakhs on top of it and make it a larger size. That is one option. You can also create your own small angel fund and have your own sector theses. You want to invest in agriculture, you want to invest in health and all of that. Third, you can also invest in mainstream impact funds as limited partners, as LPs, right? It all depends upon what's the size we are talking about. If it's a very small amount in like tens of lakhs and then crores, maybe I would say you personally investing makes sense. If there are multiple crores, then you can always invest in these kind of funds. And now the lines of impact investing and normal investing are blurring because more and more like edtech, health tech, fintech, they're all also part of impact. So you can also find a lot of deals through T-Hub, which is a mainstream incubator, or even let's say angel platforms, etc. So you can participate through those channels as well. If you are an entrepreneur, well, you can get incubated by any of these incubators, including various impact incubators, and you can get seed funded from that also. So happy to take these things offline and make any connections for you as well.
We have another question for US funding. It's from Amit. For US funding, I'm forming a deal where company can LLC do, or I need to form a C corp. Also, from the valuation perspective, I'm positioning as one, cash spent, sweat equity second, or third, IP. Is that a good way?
Vikram, you want to take
So,
this? I can add.
Amit, I think our expertise covers more the Indian markets and Southeast Asia. But having said that, we are also exploring working with a few partners for the US market for valuation specifically. We can maybe connect after this session, and we will be happy to connect you to them, and then you can have the discussion there. But yeah, our experience and background is more in these markets. So.
Yeah, also my fellow founders who are attending the session, if you want to have a one-on-one session with Vikram and Srikanth as office hours, you all know my mail ID. To drop me a message or a mail. I would love to facilitate that as well. You can have much deeper conversation in terms of your startup, your fundraise pursuits, and take that forward accordingly. Right. Srikanth, I think we can stop the screen share. And
Oh,
I
sorry.
have a couple of questions. If someone has, I think we have a hard stop at 5, but I'll take a couple of minutes to take these questions. So, especially, what are your thoughts on when a startup, especially on the slabs, when a startup is raising angel fund versus pre-series series? What do you think the ideal slabs that they look at in terms of the cap table management? That's one thing. And second, the most prominent question that my startups keep asking is like, is it good to dilute cap when they do friends and family? Like, how does that go?
It is good to dilute cap as in.
When they do friends and family round.
Okay. No, I'm saying, so if tomorrow you do a price round, which means you are issuing shares at a particular valuation, you are diluting anyway, right? So like I told in the example, if you want to avoid dilution upfront and you both are not on the same page with regard to valuation. Now, for example, in this case, Amit says he is valuing from IP point of view, and let's say has a very deep tech startup, and and he says this can go like into multi-billion market, so I don't want to give like a 5 crore valuation to anyone at this stage. So then Amit could go for a convertible or avoid, so it can be any convertible instruments, like Vikram mentioned. It could be a convertible note, it could be a safe note, it could be CCD. Basically they are like more like debt instruments. Some of them are redeemable, some of them not, and avoid the question of dilution for the time being, because as of now both of you are not agreeing on the right page. But with regard to dilution, again, there is no right answer here, because it's like a market, right? Like today onions can be at 80 rupees to that way. So it depends on demand and supply. If there are a lot of investors wanting to invest in you, you have the bargaining power and you can strike a particular dilution. If there's only one person, and then that person has the bargaining power, right? Kind of a thing. And that is the way it works. But there are ballparks, I would say. So for example, any venture capital who wants to come will not come on alone if you're not giving them like let's say less than 15%, like a serious venture capital, for example, right? Incubators, they are in the range of 10%, 12%, right? So these are the kind of dilutions. So for an early stage friends and family incubators, you can expect like a 10%, 12% dilution. Again, it's a factor of how much runway you're getting also, right? If you're getting an 18-month runway, 24-month runway, I mean, diluting 10 to 15% for an early stage is very reasonable. And when more strategic investors come with much firepower, gunpowder that you can kind of think, we have also seen that typical VCs, they take between 15 and 25%, right? Now these are very ballpark estimates. Now if you are doing a bridge round or a very ad hoc round, which is not in the trajectory of, so typically you do a, let's say, a 1 million seed round, then you do a 5 million pre-series A, then you do a 10 million series A, and that is the way. If you don't do as per the trajectory, then you can go for a convertible kind of instruments, where you say, let's not agree on the valuation for now and let's park it later. So this is broad idea I want to give, but again, like I said, these are very, very subjective.
The lines are blurring between your seed, pre-seed, series A, etc. Especially with and even angels. You have angels who are writing large check sizes. You have so-called super angels who write like $1 million, up to like $5 million, etc.
Yeah, and that definitions are changing. For example, when Kunal Shah or cult founder raised their seed, they raised a seed for 20 million. While in Social Alpha, we used to write seed for 550 lakhs, right? So, it's very, very different. And that's the beauty of the sector, basically. There are all kinds of...
The sector is always fluctuating. And on the other hand, it's hard for entrepreneurs to keep up with that pace and also have a
I wouldn't say that. I would say everyone has the space here. It's a very welcoming sector. There are proprietorship. They don't even need money. Like the bootstrapped companies, they don't need money. They're cash surplus. They are Zerodha became billion unicorn without without taking any money, and there are other side who want to burn money and acquire customers. They're all different business models. That is the beauty of the sector. I feel that it
Yeah,
welcomes entrepreneurial spirit.
Srikanth coming from an investor background, I can completely empathize. Me coming from a startup background, I want to take my startup side. Having said that, it was a very wonderful session, guys. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you all here. And also, founders, if you would like to use Capita in your fundraise pursuits, do let me know. I'll give you the free access for you to go forward. Yeah, Abhishek, okay, wait, let me unmute you. Abhishek has raised the hand. You want to ask a question? 1 second. Abhishek, do you want to ask a question? I'm just allowing you to talk. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, Abhishek.
Yeah, if any participants you would like to ask questions, please, you can just raise your hand. I'll give you the option.
Vivek has raised hand.
Yeah, I'll give Vivek. You can actually unmute yourself now. Okay, I can understand, Abhishek. Vivek, I gave you the permission to unmute. You can ask a question. Or you can type it in the chat box as well. For the participants who are like not part of our community, I'm just dropping my mail ID too. Please reach out to me anytime. Any closing remarks, Vikram and Srikanth?
So no, I think
we had T-Hub. We don't necessarily do very formal session where we like, have crossfire
like
questions, but we are very, we are very friendly with our entrepreneurs. So
absolutely. No, but Aarti, just want to thank you for the opportunity, and it's been great interacting with all of you. And yeah, I think we are looking forward to a continuing engagement. We'll be happy to help in any way possible. Either from a platform perspective, if you find it relevant, like Srikanth said, we do have an offer for T-Hub participants, or anything else which you feel any of our experiences would be of aid to you as you build your businesses. We'll be more than happy to help, because we see ourselves as playing we want to play an important role in the ecosystem itself and be ecosystem enablers, and that's what motivates us to get out of bed every day and do what we do. So we'll be very happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn, on email as well. So we have just typed out our email IDs on chat. Look forward to engaging, and hope to have many more sessions as well.
Thank you, Srikanth and Vikram. We also got requests in terms of valuation and how an investor thinks, how a lawyer thinks, and also a founder who has already raised things. I'm working on that as well. For all the participants, we'll keep you posted on that as well. And Amit, I'll surely connect you with Vikram and Srikanth to take forward the conversation. It was a pleasure having you all. This is Aarti, Senior Executive Startup Program, signing off. Thank you, Srikanth, Vikram. On a special note, thank you so much, Shankar, who is behind the scenes and helped me to pull this show. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.